Anyway, let me make myself bigger. So where were we?
We were at the Big Ten.
Yeah, I'm fooling with myself in the top right corner, trying to make myself bigger.
Shannon, are you playing with yourself?
Yes, I am. Yes,
Okay.
I am. All right, forget it. So Big Ten, I believe I had 6. One is Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and USC.
Yeah.
So
I had all but that was all but one for me in this no-brainer list. I left Wisconsin out of my no-brainer list. However, they are the first team on my next kind of
thing. You could argue maybe they're the next tier down. I argue for Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But so that
they're
brings us.
But it wasn't a slam dunk no-brainer for me.
It's fair. So Pac-12, excluding UCLA and USC, I only see one team, and that is Oregon.
Those Oregon Ducks,
and you could, again, argue that they're kind of an outlier of this list. They're not as successful as the other schools. However, this stage of realignment is about branding and resources and how much viewership you bring to a TV contract, and I think Oregon does that in spades.
Yes. Yeah, they've got those things that you talk about, branding, eyeballs. I think regionality is a factor in this, where you're bringing an entire region, but also in this no-brainer list, it's you're bringing you have that nationwide brand, and certainly resources and backing. And Oregon has maybe the most resources and backing of anybody with Nike, down the street. So I mean, yeah, they were the only one for me in the future Pac-12 outside of USC, in the current Pac-12 that was a no-brainer for this. Yeah.
All right, so then that leaves the other 9 schools from the SEC, and that's honestly where you're going to find the bulk of these schools.
Yeah, the SEC and Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah. So I have Bama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, A&M, Texas, and Oklahoma. Yeah, those are the 9.
Yeah. So the only ones that we differ on are kind of placement of a couple of these. My phase 1, my no-brainers: Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M, LSU.
Yeah.
Texas and Oklahoma, like I said, are in that list. But those were mine. Like I said, those aren't being left out. Those are immediate qualifications. You're getting a letter first day. Tennessee is down my list. They're still they're in my league, but they have fallen off a bit. If this was 1999, 2000, 2001, they'd be first or second on the list. But they have fallen off a bit because of the hiring strategies of the administration, and I just I didn't think that they were a slam dunk no-brainer. So not on my first list. Like I said, that's where we kind of differ, is the bottom of that no-brainer list. You have those 5 extras, but all of them are on my next list anyway. So
keep in mind, we're doing this together. We're not doing this separately. We are not composing this list of 40 different teams. So now we get to the point where we're going to have to argue for the other 20 schools in this league.
Yeah.
And it's a unanimous vote. So I hope we can make strong arguments.
Let's do it.
So my phase 2 of this, poaching, I guess you could call it, differed from yours. I still elected to go with great brands, but I went to another sport, and that is basketball. So I added the great basketball brands. And my schools were, I had 5. I had Kentucky, I had North Carolina, UCLA, and Michigan State, and Louisville was the other one.
Yeah.
My reasoning for that, and I explain it in my blog post that's going to be published tomorrow. I think it's foolish to think a great basketball brand can't carry over to football.
Yeah.
The majority of football players in this country are African American and are located in urban areas where basketball is probably the more popular sport, or at least more popular than in the suburban areas.
Mm-hmm.
So those brands resonate with recruits. And why a lot of those schools, particularly Michigan State, and I'd throw Kentucky in there, have had unprecedented success in football in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And we've seen it the other way. I don't mean to interrupt you, but we've seen it the other way around. Great football brands carry over to basketball. Ohio State, Michigan, Florida have all built really good basketball programs in the last decade or so because they have used that money from football to allocate to basketball.
Auburn Tigers.
And you've seen it, in Auburn too. And you've seen it with a lot of these SEC schools. They're finally like, we have all this money. We can be good in basketball. You've seen Bama be good. You've seen Auburn be good. You've seen South Carolina make the Final Four.
Let's pump the brakes on Alabama being good, but okay.
I think Nate Oates has them in a pretty good spot right now.
He stinks. Out loud.
But they've been able to spend money to get great coaches, and then obviously those brands resonate with recruits because they're really good at football, and football is king in this country.
It's you really and while yes you really saw it when SEC Network kicked up.
Yeah, is
really you saw the SEC say, okay, we have an asinine amount of money. We can start pouring. These schools are saying, okay, we're getting an extra $80 million a year or whatever it is. We can start pouring resources into these basketball programs, women's basketball programs. You've seen an unprecedented run from schools like Mississippi State and Texas A&M and South Carolina in women's basketball, and baseball programs are getting money poured into them. There's been an unprecedented run of national champions from across the SEC. Florida, Vanderbilt.
The two teams in the national championship, weren't they SEC schools? Or was one Oklahoma, so that's technically Big 12 for now?
Big 12 for now, but I mean, but you've seen it's just since, like I said, just since the SEC Network, you've seen Florida, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt. Auburn has made the College World Series twice. I mean, it's all of this money coming into these athletic programs from media rights and apparel and everything, all of this money that's coming in, a rising tide lifts all boats. So, yes, it's mostly going to the football program because they're paying to broadcast football games, but they're paying every school has $75 million a year to broadcast those football games. Like I said, rising tide lifts all boats. So, volleyball, swimming and diving, soccer.
Now, I'm curious. I know we don't have, not to pick on Vanderbilt, I know we don't have all 16 schools from the SEC making this league. I think, though, I had more than you did.
Yeah, because like I said in part one here, we looked at this a little bit differently.
Yeah.
In terms of the makeup of our leagues. Just because you went a little bit more overall athletic department, especially in this second phase.
Yeah.
You went a little bit more overall athletic department, whereas I stuck a little bit to football in terms of the brands and resources and like I talked about a couple of days ago to you, like history and tradition and pageantry of football itself. And that's not to say that, like I said, these 5 schools that you've got in this second phase are all massive brands.
One school I almost considered putting in here was Baylor.
In that second phase?
Yeah. They've become, one of the top basketball programs
in the country now. Like, I think the biggest thing for me is that it's fairly recent, and these 5 schools are not They're blue blood basketball programs. Every basketball player in the country knows Kentucky, Louisville, Michigan State, North Carolina, UCLA.
Yeah.
Those are the five blue blood basketball programs. One could probably argue.
Now, how about this? Did I sway you on any of those? Because I think we have some. You probably have Michigan State. I think you had UCLA.
I had UCLA. I've got Do I have Michigan State? I don't have Michigan State. I've got UCLA. I've got North Carolina.
Okay. I thought we had two, but I was thinking Michigan State.
Yeah, no, I've got UCLA and North Carolina in my. They're both actually one's in my next phase, and one's in my third phase of entrance. So, I think your points are sound and valid. Like I said, I didn't look at it from as much of an overall athletic department perspective as you did. I went kind of strictly college football brand and that. So I just couldn't. Kentucky, I couldn't get there. They may get there soon if Mark Stoops keeps doing what he does.
Yeah. Come a long way.
Yes, Kentucky was not laughing stock. They were the redheaded stepchild of the SEC for as long as we can remember. As long as the SEC's been around, they have been in football at least. Because even Vandy has had its times in football. I don't know if Vandy's not a better off historically football program than Kentucky is. They're probably pretty close, but I couldn't include Kentucky. I couldn't include Louisville and Michigan
State. Louisville is an interesting one. So one thing I didn't mention this earlier. One thing that I specifically targeted, and you did too for the most part. I targeted the state schools. That's what runs college athletics. Are these state schools? Yeah. I firmly believe private schools are at a disadvantage with their academic requirements. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to go to a really good school, go to a really good school. If the school wants to focus on academics, that's totally fine. But I wouldn't expect to have the resources and the support to compete in athletics because of that. If you have high academic requirements, you're restricting how many students are allowed, which means you have a smaller alumni base, which means you have less support. And less or fewer resources because of that.
Yeah, and we've talked about this. There's exceptions to
that. There are, yes.
We've talked about Notre Dame already. We've talked about USC already. Those are probably the two biggest ones.
Miami.
We'll talk about Miami. That's the third one. We'll talk about BYU because I think we both have them.
Yes.
Close. Soon. So yes, these state schools that get these gigantic. Paychecks from the government. Just you can't fundraise.
I didn't even think about being government funded. That's another good point.
Yeah, so I mean, it's tough. It's tougher for private schools. That's why schools like Miami and Notre Dame and USC are that much more impressive because it's not subsidized. They are private. They're private institutions. That puts them at that much of more of a disadvantage. So I mean, that's something that I didn't really think about too much. It kind of just happened that way for me, realistically. But like, it's something that, like you said, it's something to think that kind of.
Well, of the 20 schools that I had that were no-brainers, 17 of them were public land-grant schools.
State schools, land-grant, yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
And of the 65 current Power 5, even if you want to go to 69 and count the 4 teams that the Big 12 is adding, I believe it was 53 with 65, and then 3 out of the 4 that the Big 12 are adding are public. So that's 56 out of the 69 schools are public. This is what drives college athletics.
Yeah. it's something that's definitely deserves to be talked about and thought about when you're doing something like this, because, like you said, it does drive college athletics.
The point I was trying to make with that was Louisville is an interesting case because that's not a big school.
No, it's
the
not.
Enrollment is only about 15,000, and I strongly considered leaving them out. I put them in, though, because they get a lot of TV viewership. I mean, a lot. It's about 1 million people. I think they averaged about 1 million viewers in football from 2015 to 2019. So that was also a big factor for me. Really, toward the end, I was like, all right, how much viewership do you have?
Yeah. I like you said, I like where your head is and like the thought process behind your second phase.
Well, you have 2 schools, and I told you, I was like, I did not think of them. Those are really good points, and we'll get to those here in a bit. But
yeah. So let's run down my second phase here. So your second phase, just like you said, kind of went to really, really noticeable and really, really brands that everybody knows.
Yeah.
But maybe not for football. Basketball brands and stuff like that. I went, like I said, I was a little bit more football-centric than you, so I went in my second phase to teams that have had recent success, so it's teams that people are going to want to watch. Because at the end of the day, that's what drives things, is how many – that's why all these media rights things and broadcasting is running realignment. How many people are you going to get to watch your football games? So I went my second phase, teams that have had enough recent success to say there's going to be a lot of people wanting to watch them and are large enough brands to kind of reach out past their kind of regional constraints. Because college football as a whole is very regionalized in its current form. Obviously what we're doing here is going to nationalize things. But in its current form, it's very regionalized. And so these schools are, I believe, big enough brands to reach out past those kind of regional constraints. So we've talked about a couple of them so far. I have Wisconsin in this. I have Florida State here. I have University of Tennessee here. I have the University of Iowa here.
Yep. I'm sorry. Start from the top again. I should have counted to see if I have all these schools too.
Okay. Yeah. University of Wisconsin.
Yep.
Was first for me. Like I said, they're regional. They're big enough regionally and can break those constraints. Florida State, deep, rich history, certainly large enough brand to necessitate with the amount of eyes that they're going to be bringing in. University of Tennessee, like I said, great, another really good history. And there's another thing that we'll talk about. I'll talk about in a minute. That kind of this list, this phase kind of somewhat brings up. So we'll talk about that in a minute. The University of Iowa, I have in my second phase.
Okay, that is one I have not gotten to, but I did have on my list.
Yeah. Okay. I have Virginia Tech.
Yep.
In my second phase. I have the West Virginia Mountaineers.
I appreciate that because I could not be the one to nominate them.
Yes. So I do have West Virginia in my second phase. I have BYU in my second phase, which we've already talked a little bit about. I have North Carolina in my second phase, like I said, we've talked about. And then my last school in my second phase is Oklahoma State.
Okay, I think we were – how many did you have? 10 there, maybe, roughly?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I had 9.
9. We were 9 for 9 there.
9 for 9. So, yeah. So, all of those 9 are in your list somewhere.
Yes.
It's a little bit jumbled. So the other thing that that some of these schools, kind of the base of what I wanted to get in these schools is that school owns that state. You look at Wisconsin.
That's a good point.
You look at Wisconsin. You look at Tennessee. You look at Iowa. You look at West Virginia. And probably can argue for North Carolina. I won't include those in that. I won't include North Carolina in that list of them.
That's close, but I would probably say NC State holds some weight. Duke holds some weight.
Yeah. There's other schools that hold weight in North Carolina, but North Carolina is probably the flagship athletic department. probably the flagship football program in North Carolina. Like I said, that was a little, but Wisconsin, Tennessee, Iowa, West Virginia, those 4 own the states that they're in. No doubt about that. So that was one thing that I wanted to think about in this phase. Like I said, it all comes down to how many eyeballs you're going to be bringing. Those 4 schools own those states. Florida State obviously is one of those schools that was going to have to be involved somehow in this because of the history of that school, the football craze of the state of Florida. Virginia Tech and Oklahoma State were more on the recent success side of things. That I think that what they've done recently over the past 20 years has given them the ability to play themselves into this league. And then North Carolina we talked about, and then BYU.
I want to touch up on this one.
With
BYU is probably the most underrated brand, I think, in college, definitely college football. I consider them to be Notre Dame light.
Yeah.
Notre Dame obviously has a much bigger following, but being a Catholic school, a lot of Catholics gravitate to cheering for Notre Dame. And obviously the Irish, since they're the Fighting Irish, a lot of Irish people flock to Notre Dame. I am Irish. I do not. I hate Notre Dame.
Yes. There's also that part of it. Yeah.
But BYU is similar. There's a lot of Mormons in this country, not as many Catholics, but there are a lot of Mormons in this country. They flock to BYU, I'm sure. I do. One of my good friends in grad school, Jerem, I've been meaning to have him on the podcast, is a Mormon. But he did not go to BYU. He does not cheer for BYU. So interesting case there. But another thing with BYU, it is a private school, but the enrollment is large. It's like 30,000 students, which I did not expect.
Big enrollment, and they've got campuses all over the daggone place too. So I mean,
look at their field. Have you seen their stadium?
In terms of endowments, it's massive, and they sell it out every week. In terms of endowments, they've got a massive one because, like you say, they're the flagship school in the United States, and maybe in the world, probably, for an entire religion of people.
Yeah.
They've got astronomical resources, and you just don't think about them because they are, like you said.
Well, one thing is they're out west. Many people, by the time BYU is playing, are sleeping.
Utah, yeah.
And, some people, I would say mock BYU, and I've done it too. We all do it. Every time they win, enjoy some root beer or something. But I can remember when the Big 12 was looking to add schools after Texas and Oklahoma left, I remember there being a lot of articles saying how big of a get BYU would be. Because it would basically, losing Texas and Oklahoma drops their revenue a good amount because of those brands leaving. But adding BYU would have caused almost virtually no drop in revenue because of that. Because of their branding and because they're in the Mountain Standard Time Zone or whatever. And that's also huge with TV contracts.
A lot of people forget this too. BYU has their own network.
Yeah.
They've got a dedicated television network for Brigham Young University. I mean, not a lot. Outside of maybe Utah and premium packages, I wouldn't expect a whole lot of folks have it. But if they wanted to pump some money in that thing, get some more eyeballs on it.
Well, I think maybe the Big 12 network or Big 12 Plus, whatever it is absorbing that. But yeah.
But I mean, that's the kind of reach that we're talking about here. It's a school. It's got its own network.
You could also make an argument that it's in the Salt Lake City market. It's not, but it's
not a huge market, but it's there.
I almost called it a suburb of Salt Lake City, and it's not, but it's almost right there.
Big enough.
Yeah.
It's a big market regionally that you're going to bring eyeballs. And then on top of it, you've got the national pull of, like I said, all the Mormons. And like I said, that's why I think, and I would assume you think too, that's why I think that BYU has to be involved here.
It's also just a respectable football program.
pretty respected football program, pretty decent history, has a national championship, has a Heisman Trophy winner. Guy invented like the spread, like that played out there, pretty decent football history.
Agreed. So yeah, we went 9 for 9 on those, or for yours. So you didn't really sway me on any of them. I would imagine I probably swayed you on Michigan State. It sounds like.
Yeah, I think Michigan State would be the one that you would have swayed me for.
Okay.
Yeah, because I just don't think Kentucky and Louisville meet that criteria for me.
So let's go ahead and say we're at 30 right now, right? Yeah, 30. So phase 3 for me, and this is again where we're different here. Mine involved basically large schools and big markets.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 5 schools for this one too. I had Arizona State. At one point, I believe Arizona State was the biggest school, or top 2 or 3 in the country. I think it has dipped to 5, 6, or 7, somewhere in there. But it's located right in Phoenix, and it still has an enrollment of about 50 or 60,000.
55 or something.
Yeah. So Arizona State was one. I was trying to go alphabetical order. Now I don't remember. So the other one was in the Big Ten. It was Minnesota. Again, not very many people know. Minnesota, large school, has an enrollment of about 50,000, located right in the heart of Minneapolis. So I put them on my list, and I believe you did too.
Yeah, I've got Minnesota too.
Then the third one was, I believe, most were in the Pac-12 actually. So University of Washington, again, state school, about 30,000 enrollment. I think it was actually larger than that. I think it ranked in the top 15 in enrollment, close pushing 50,000, I think. So included them, also right in the heart of Seattle. Then I put the University of Utah in there. I know you put them in too at some point. Not the biggest school. I believe their enrollment is closer to 20,000. But I think they've proven it on the football field that they can compete. They're located in the heart of Salt Lake City. Not only that, but the city of Salt Lake supports them. They sell out almost every game. It's a tough place to play. So I put them on there. I had a 5th team. Who was the 5th team? I'm doing this blind. I should have had it pulled up.
TCU.
Oh, yeah, TCU. So, yeah, that's an anomaly. That is not a large school. TCU is a private school. However, I included them on the list because they're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They also draw a lot of TV viewership. They ranked in the top 25 in TV viewership from 2015 to 2019. They averaged, I know West Virginia was around 1.25 million, and they were 30th. So TCU would have been more than that. So probably 1.3 to 1.5 million viewers a week. So
yeah. I have 3 of these schools in my list. The 2 that I don't have are Arizona State and TCU. I just don't.
You could convince me Arizona State shouldn't be on my list, but I included them because I really do think they're a sleeping giant in football.
In that market, yeah. I like I said, I understand your thinking there. I just don't know if Arizona's market is big enough, because that would mean that Arizona State would basically pull that entire market.
Yeah.
In the state of Arizona, the Southwest, outside of LA. I personally don't believe that Arizona State has that kind of pull.
That's fair.
They've got, like you said, they've got a massive student enrollment, a massive alumni base. I don't know if a whole lot of people that graduated from Arizona State particularly care that they graduated from Arizona State, because it's become so national to say, I went to Arizona State. It was a party school. I loved it. But are those people donating to the school?
Right.
Are they becoming boosters? Are they buying season tickets? Are they going out of their way to watch sporting events?
All very good points, and why I considered leaving them off my list.
Yeah, I think Arizona State, and I think you can make that same argument for TCU, except for the fact that they're in Texas. People are going to watch football in Texas. TCU's probably the biggest pull in that market.
I would still probably say Texas controls that market.
Texas controls the market. Texas and Oklahoma both probably control that market better than, say, TCU, Baylor, SMU, any of the DFW Metroplex. Really, probably anybody outside of that. But just given the sheer size and the amount of eyeballs that you can bring in just from the Metroplex, I think I could be convinced that TCU does have a place at this table, but I don't know. The private school thing is a little iffy for me.
And you're right. I mean, I really teetered with TCU. I was more convinced with Arizona State probably than I was TCU until I saw the TV numbers. Then I was like, hard to leave a school like that out.
A lot of those are probably just like that's people in the Metroplex and outside of and surrounding areas mostly. So I think that alone you can make the argument that draw matters. And you need a foothold in that market. Like I said, you're going to get it with Texas and Oklahoma anyway. But if you can get a tent pole in that market, in that Metroplex, I think you're probably right that it's probably worth having a place at the thing.
There were a lot of schools that are located in large markets that I did not include, or fairly large markets. One was Georgia Tech, which I believe is on your list.
Georgia Tech is on my list.
Another one was NC State. That's in Raleigh. Not a small market. I mean, or not a large market, but not small either. It's got a hockey team.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not sure that they even have their own market. I think UNC does because UNC is right down the road.
Right.
Another one was the University of Maryland. I kind of teetered with them. I had them on at one point, and then I took them off. They're not in a large city, but they are smack dab in the middle between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. A lot of people live in that DMV area. Another one was the University of Pittsburgh. I can tell you right now, Pittsburgh does not have the support and resources to be a part of this. They don't even fill up their stadium. They sold out for the Backyard Brawl here in a few weeks. I guarantee you that place is going to be mostly West Virginia fans.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, or a bunch of y'all going up there.
People go up there. I remember being a student, and our mascot, which is voted, now it's every 2 year or every year. Back when I was there, it was once that mascot graduated, we voted for a new one. But our mascot went to the game. He didn't wear West Virginia, the mascot look, but they showed him on TV wearing a West Virginia shirt at Pitt on the Monday night Labor Day game against Florida State Jameis Winston. I was like, that right there is Pitt's problem.
He's the Mountaineer, yeah.
Pitt doesn't even have their own facilities. They share it with the Steelers.
Steelers, yeah. No, I totally agree on Pitt. They never even crossed my mind.
Yeah, not for me either. And it's not just because I hate them. I'm making legitimate arguments here.
Yeah, no, you are, for sure. Because your arguments are the same as mine.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, like I said, they never even crossed my mind.
No. There might have been some more. Oh, Cal. I left Cal out. That Cal is actually a big school. But again, academic requirements and support, I don't think they have it. And they're right there. They're not in the San Francisco area, but they are in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Big school in a big market, but they could not give any shits about athletics much anymore.
Yeah.
They are really steering hard into academics. So our third part of these lists are kind of similar. I went for teams that are gigantic media markets, big. This is really my when it boils down to it, how many eyeballs can you bring to my league? How many eyeballs can you bring? Gigantic media markets, maybe not the most national brands, but these schools sit inside of a huge media market. So there's two in this list that I included that was the same in your phase, and that's University of Washington and University of Minnesota.
Okay.
Two huge markets, tentpole schools in those markets. This is my kind of got a little crazy list. UCLA is in this list. They're not the tentpole school, but you cannot discount the LA market.
And I do believe LA does care more USC than UCLA, but they show up kind of for UCLA.
Said this is my how many eyeballs can you get on my league phase.
UCLA is tough because it's tough to judge. I think their support because they play in the Rose Bowl and that's all the way across the city of LA.
Yeah.
So not very many people flock there.
Halfway to San Diego.
Yeah.
Not really, but so UCLA was on this list. I have the University of Houston on this list.
That's one I strongly consider too.
Because now they may not be the kind of tentpole school in Houston. I would bet probably Texas A&M is a bigger draw in that market. College Station's just outside of Houston, about an hour, but Houston is for a long time has been a Power 5 team or an athletic department that acts like a Power 5 team stuck in a group of 5.
And they've only really realized it in the last 15 years.
They have all the money in the world.
Yeah.
There's so much oil money down there. It's ridiculous. They've got all of the backing in the world. All resources, anything they could. So they're a team that I felt had these intangibles. They've had enough success for me to say, they're not going to stink up the place. Recently, they've had some good success. They've got a Heisman Trophy winner in Andre Ware. Decent history. Enough of that for me to say, okay, this is something and I'm interested to see how they do in the Big 12 recruiting-wise because talent-rich state, talent-rich region, if they cross over into Louisiana, maybe go up into the Great Plains a little bit, go over into the Southeast, they're kind of maybe a little bit of a sleeping giant.
I agree.
So that's one thing. Houston was something a team that I felt like I probably needed to include.
So I will tell you, you make some really good points with Houston. They were on my list and I took them off at the last second, or maybe not last second, but for a while I had them there. I've been to the city of Houston quite a few times. I'm right down the road from the city of Houston currently. I can tell you right now, I don't really think either Texas or A&M have much of a massive following in the city of Houston. And I don't really think UH does either. But that's also kind of a benefit to them.
You know what school kind of sneaky has a large following in Houston? I'm pretty sure, and you may be able to say better than this. LSU's got a huge contingent in Houston.
So I live, I basically live in Louisiana, but I am in the state of Texas. I see more probably LSU than I do any other team. Texas is close, A&M is close, but I see a lot more purple and gold probably than anything else.
That doesn't surprise me.
And I think Houston is the same way. I would probably put LSU up there. Houston, it's tough. It's about like Atlanta, I would say. It's just a mix of a bunch. Even West Virginia has a large alumni presence in Houston because of NASA. And I'm sure it's the case with every school that has an engineering program.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. I know Auburn does.
And on top of that, Houston's a big school. It's about 45,000 students, or maybe not quite that big, but I know it's over 40,000 students. Big
school, yeah. Like I said, that all of those reasons, I feel like they're a worthy inclusion here. So I'll move on. This is where I have Georgia Tech.
We actually debated that one for a while.
We did. Yeah, we talked about Georgia Tech for a minute. I have them here because of Atlanta, because they're the tentpole school in Atlanta. Georgia is there. They're the tentpole school in the state of Georgia. You're going to get the Georgia eyes. But I don't think, and you talked about this earlier, the cultural relevance of the city of Atlanta matters football players to young kids to people our age. And welcome to Atlanta, where the players play. I believe that was Ludacris. It may have been Andre 3000 that said that. Who knows? I'm a white kid from the suburbs. Give me a break. But the cultural significance of the city of Atlanta and Georgia Tech being that school in that city, as big as it has become, and we've talked about this a lot, but how much I hate what Atlanta is now. It felt to me like a worthy inclusion because of all of these things. It's something that, like I said, this is my phase where who can bring the most eyeballs to my league. I feel like Atlanta was a place to get those eyeballs.
I argue you're getting Atlanta regardless if you get Georgia Tech or not.
Yeah, that's the only kind of,
because you got Georgia, you got Bama, you got Tennessee, you got Clemson, you got Auburn,
right,
and then the Florida schools.
So that would be one where I would be okay with you not agreeing with me and us kind of nixing Georgia Tech, because, like I said, we are getting that region, those eyeballs anyway, almost certainly. But I felt like it was important to have that tentpole in the city.
That's fair. That's fair.
And so that's why I included them there. And a lot of these schools are that way. So I'll go down to my next one. My next one is the University of Central Florida. They are
another good one. Another good one.
They are maybe the number one school in terms of enrollment in the country.
I think they dipped to number 2, but I'm not sure.
All of the schools in Florida are gigantic.
Yeah, except Miami.
Well, there's probably a lot of reasons why they are there, but we won't get into those right now. But UCF, smack dab in the middle of a eyeball-rich environment.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get that market, that Central Florida market, that you're probably not like for sure getting with Florida State. Florida is a little bit more of a probability that you're going to get that Central Florida market. Gainesville is not as far south as a lot of people think it is. But
no, I was going to argue they're more probably Panhandle than
anything. And then Miami is South Florida, so obviously that's not. So I felt like I needed to get into Central Florida, into that Orlando, Tampa, St. Pete, Sunshine, I-4 corridor. And Central Florida is obviously the choice there. So a school now, like I said, because I'm a little bit more football centric than you are, they are pumping money into their football program. They hired Gus Malzahn, a bona fide Power 5 coach, as much as everybody I know, and all of the Auburn people have a million different opinions on Gus Malzahn. He is a bona fide Power 5 successful head coach. They sell out their stadium every week. They travel very well. Auburn played them in a Peach Bowl in 2017 when they claimed the national championship because they beat Auburn.
Because they were the real national champs.
Yes. The actual national champions that year. If it was Bama.
It was Bama. That was the first Bama-Georgia matchup. Yeah,
that's right, because they didn't beat Auburn. They didn't beat us. But anyway, they traveled just as well as Auburn did, and Auburn historically can sell out.
Auburn is like an hour and a half from Atlanta.
It's an hour and a half from Atlanta, the easiest drive on the face of the planet. They can sell out the Georgia Dome or Mercedes-Benz now. We can sell it out by ourselves. But that game, UCF traveled just as well as we did, which really stuck out to me because that's not even, they were just getting going at that point.
Yeah.
So that's enough recent success. Like I said, they have the enrollment to support whatever they want to do. They've got the alumni base to support whatever they want to do. And now they've said, okay, we're going to start pouring money into this football program. The Big 12 wants us. We're getting into the Big 12. Now the resources will really start flowing in. And we have a market that is marketable. People are going to want to get into our market because of how many people there are. So I felt like UCF was a good inclusion here.
Strongly considered them. Probably a little too new for me.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to see more how they fare in the Big 12, but you make a lot of really good arguments. And I'll be honest, I don't like having an odd number of teams in the state of Florida in this league. I debated going 4, and if I did go 4, it's easily UCF.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, I think their enrollment's close to 80,000 students, and I believe that's just undergrad. I think, don't quote me on that.
Stupid. How many people go to school there?
But it's a huge campus, huge alumni base, like you just said, a lot of resources. I wrote about this when they joined the Big 12. They've come such a long way just in the last 25 years.
25 years.
25 years ago, they were, or back in the early 2000s, they were in the Conference USA. They really weren't all that competitive. And it kind of stayed that way until the Big East exploded or imploded. And then the American formed. And then I would argue the American just kind of took a chance on them because they needed to have a presence in Orlando. And ever since then, the school has exploded onto the scene in the last 10 years. And now they're going to the Big 12. And I can't imagine what they're going to do with the money and the resources they're going to get from that conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I said, those reasons are enough for me to include them. So this is where it gets a little hairy.
You have some on these lists that I'm like, what?
University of Minnesota was one that we already talked about.
Not that one, yeah.
I included Stanford here.
Yeah, that was one.
Because of what you talked about earlier, in that Stanford gets you into the Bay Area, which is a gigantic media market. They don't particularly care about sports much. Stanford is the private school, the academics first school. That we don't have many of those on this list, if any, really outside of Stanford. But I think that they warrant inclusion for the foothold you get in the Bay Area market alone. Then you add on the recent success that they have had with David Shaw and Jim Harbaugh, and you can go back to the Steve Young era.
Steve Young went to BYU, Hoss. John Elway.
John Elway was the one I was looking for. I knew it was one of those early 90s quarterbacks. You can go back to that, and they're putting a lot of players into the league. Christian McCaffrey, Andrew Luck. I think that they're worthy enough of inclusion, like I said, almost simply based on their market. And then you add in the recent success that they have had, the endowment that they have, the alumni support that they have is huge. Not a whole lot of them, but a lot of them have a lot of money, and they give to the school.
Yeah.
Whether or not that means it makes it to the athletic department,
That is why I'm going to disagree with you on Stanford.
That's when I'm okay with you disagreeing on, because there's 3 or 4 here that I would probably be okay with you disagreeing on. But Stanford is definitely one that I'm totally okay with you disagreeing.
So I will say, you make some good points. 10
yes,
years ago, I would argue, or maybe not 10, but 5 years ago, I would argue for Stanford. They've kind of teetered off.
Yeah.
I think David Shaw's on the hot seat this year, and then who knows after he's gone, if/when he's gone. But my main point as to why I don't think so is to what you said. Do they really support athletics in terms of money? And I'm not convinced that they do. I think that they and some of these other schools like Duke and Northwestern and Vanderbilt, I think they put academics first. Nothing wrong with that. But you're not going to have a seat at the table.
And that doesn't mean that their athletic departments are bad.
No.
I think Stanford's got a fine athletic department, got a really good baseball program, have a really good, a pretty decent men's basketball program, a pretty damn good women's basketball program. I know they're national championship contenders in all the white people sports, like golf and swimming and tennis.
And that's an issue with a lot of Pac-12 schools is they care about the Olympic sports, and I'm sorry, no one really cares about the Olympic sports.
Right. Yeah. So, like I said, I think that's one where I'd be okay with you, and I have a feeling that the rest of these schools may go that way.
You had one. I don't know if it's your next one, but go ahead.
Is it the University of Memphis?
No, but that was also one where I was like, I don't know about that.
Memphis is a bit of a stretch. It kind of is along the lines of your second phase, where they are a big brand in basketball. But what I got out of Memphis is, and people don't understand how big Memphis is. The city of Memphis, the market.
Very big city.
Huge media market. It's kind of insane they only have one professional sports team because they could support a lot. The money that flows through the city of Memphis is nuts. But the university has a decent enrollment. It's not the biggest in these lists. It's not the smallest either. It's a public school. It has a large alumni base that is decently active in supporting the school. But like I said, their main attraction to me was that tentpole institution in a large national media market that I think you may not get with Tennessee being all the way across the state. You'll probably get some or most of your eyeballs, but I think if you include Memphis in this, you get the eyeballs from the Memphis media market that is wildly underrated. It's like Jacksonville. People don't understand how big Jacksonville is.
No, yeah, Jacksonville's huge.
Memphis is one of those cities that is underrated, large, huge media market. So I think that's the next. Like I said, there are a lot of other reasons that they're probably not. That at the end of the day, they're probably not going to be included here. But I wanted them on my list because of the huge media market.
I want to say this. I'm glad we went at this different ways. We're really getting two sides of the coin here.
And you also got to think it's a part of the country that is wild for football. Will watch any football that is on TV, and supports people. It supports either local people that go somewhere else, or people that come into the city. Like I know this because a lot of Memphis.
Yeah, I was just thinking you're actually really close to the city, so you would know best.
We're 5-ish, a little less than 5 hours from Memphis, so I've kind of.
I might be that far from Memphis.
To know a little bit about it. Yeah, you actually probably may not be all that far from it, but they, like I said, it's a huge market. The people there will support. I think there's enough there to support inclusion in this league. Like I said, the flip side of it is that their stadium situation is just about is horrible. I think every school on this list needs to play on campus. That's just me. I understand that some don't have that possibility, but
I don't think the Liberty Bowl is on campus. Is it?
It is.
I don't think so.
No, it's not. So I think there are probably more detriments than positives for Memphis, but like I said, I wanted to include them because of the draw of the Memphis media market.
So while you were talking, I came up with 3 points for against. I'm sorry to do it, but
like I said, these last ones in this phase, I will understand your.
Number one, I still think UT controls the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
I know I saw it in Nashville. Granted, Vanderbilt's not a very big school and obviously private, but people cared more about Tennessee than they did Vanderbilt. I'm sure it's the same in Memphis. You could probably make an argument for they care more about Ole Miss than they do Memphis.
Ole Miss, probably even Arkansas.
Yeah, probably even Arkansas. So kind of like my argument with Atlanta. I still think you're getting that market regardless. Number 2. Now, what was number 2? I forgot now. Oh, your point about on-campus stadium. I don't think that's a huge problem. I mean, we might have schools that don't have an on-campus stadium, but I that's a problem. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we left Pitt off.
Liberty Bowl is an issue, yeah.
Number 3, if a dying conference, we thought at the time, does not think you are worthy enough to be in, why should a Premier League that features the best brands in college football give you a shot?
Yeah, that's probably the stake. The stake in the heart of my Memphis argument.
That's why I saved it for last. I was trying to come up with the second one.
Yeah,
before.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And like I said, these last 5 really.
You still got one more where I'm like, come on, seriously?
Okay, we'll get there. So I'm fine with my Memphis team. I'm fine with Memphis being left off. Let's see if this is it. University of Missouri.
No.
No?
It was not the school I was thinking of. I left them off, but not for that.
Lovely. Okay, let's talk about University of Missouri. I think you get 2 media markets with the University of Missouri. I think you get the St. Louis media market. I think you get the Kansas City media market. You get a school that owns a state.
You're closer to Missouri than I am, so you would know.
Yeah, I think you get a school that owns a state. I think you get enough desirability because, I mean, you got to think the Big 12 picked them up when the Big 8 fell apart. You got to think,
Actually, it was the SWC that fell apart.
It was the SWC? Was it? Yeah. Okay, yeah, it was the SWC that fell apart.
And the Big 8 transformed to the Big 12.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. They were included in that.
Yeah.
They were big enough. They were included in that. And then they were poached by the SEC. Maybe not the best choice at the time.
They wanted the Big 10.
But they were poached by the SEC. So their desirability is pretty high and has been for a while. Like I said, I think you get a school that owns a state. I think you get 2, not the biggest media markets in the country, but you get 2 media markets that are desired for inclusion in a league like this. I mean, the SEC has gone so far as we've had tournaments up in St. Louis. The SEC basketball tournament was in St. Louis 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know if you really necessarily need that, but it gets you, like I said, that gets you that foothold in that market.
Fair argument, because I don't believe. No, you might have. You might have. I don't have either of the Illinois schools, so that's a fair point. And I think you do.
I've got the University of Illinois, and they're kind of, and that may be the school that you were talking about.
No, it's not.
It's still not. Okay,
it's still not.
So that would leave the bus.
I have my beef with Illinois too, but
okay, but with and Mizzou and Illinois are similar in the because Illinois to a bigger extent, because I think you get the Chicago media market with Illinois, like one of the big 3 in the country. You get that Chicago media market that you're not going to get with Northwestern, because Northwestern's an afterthought in this exercise. But I think you get that foothold in Illinois to Chicago, and then you can branch out from there. The detriments to Illinois is that their athletic history outside of basketball kind of sucks. They probably don't sell out their stadium. You will probably get the Chicago media market anyway with teams like
I was going to say Wisconsin and Notre Dame.
Probably even like Ohio State and Michigan. So Illinois is, like I said, these are teams that I'm okay with leaving off, but it felt important to me to get these these massive media markets, get a foothold in these media markets, get as many eyeballs on my league as possible. So the last one, and I guess this is the one you have the biggest problem with, is the University of Colorado.
No.
And
okay, before I go on, did you or did you not have SMU?
no.
I could have. I'm sorry. I could have sworn you had SMU.
No, I did not have SMU.
All right. Well, then this is a my bad scenario.
Okay.
Because I was like, why would he? In my brain, I was ready for you to say SMU. I'm like, and I was like, I'm going to tear into him and be like, why would you have SMU instead of TCU? But now this makes too much sense.
Yeah, I know. No, I did not have SMU. So Colorado is my last one, and that gets you.
I thought about them too.
Denver media market, large city media market, a lot of eyeballs on your league. To a lesser extent, obviously, as kind of these out west states, a lot of them don't particularly care that much about college football. But
I don't think they care.
Probably get a team that owns a state. Not a super talent-rich state, like I said. It's tough, but probably get a team that owns a state. And decent football history. They've got a national championship in the modern, in the past 30 years. It was shared, but, whatever. Good for them. Like I said, I think you get enough with Colorado that warrants inclusion in this. And I think that from a purely football sense, and like I said, this phase is let's get as many eyeballs on my league as I can and make the most money with these media deals. I think getting that foothold in the Denver media market, like you said, in that mountain time zone, that is such a big deal because of how games are scheduled and how TV schedules work. Getting that foothold in the mountain time zone, which is tough because there's not a whole lot of options there. One that we've talked about BYU. We haven't yet talked about Utah, but we both have Utah on our lists. And then really your only other options outside of the Arizona schools are Colorado. It is Colorado. So I think, like I said, all of those things I feel like warrant inclusion in our Premier League.
You make some good points for Colorado. I thought about them quite a few times.
The biggest detriment that you're going to tell me, maybe that you're going to tell me, is that recent cultural relevance of Colorado has plummeted. University, I mean,
yes.
Colorado is now a weed state. People, it's a hipster. It's nobody cares about the University of Colorado football anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado used to be a respectable program. In the early 2000s, they were still kind of good. And then I don't know what happened. There was a stretch there. They were like what Kansas is now. Now they have kind of worked themselves out of it and, have been to some bowl games, unlike Kansas. But I remember there was a stretch where they couldn't win more than about 2 games a year.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with their culture right now. I think they just view it as, and it sucks. And it's also probably some of these hippie Californians and West Coasters coming to Colorado and who really don't care about sports.
Yeah.
So I think you make some intriguing arguments for Colorado. At the end of the day, I'm just not sure culturally that they support the school.
Yeah.
And I don't think the school really has the resources.
They've got a big enrollment. They've got a big alumni base. So should they rally around that, they could support it. But like you said, I don't think they do right now.
Yeah.
I don't think they have what would be needed probably to, in that sense, of the schools that we're talking about. They don't have what all of our no-brainer schools. They don't have the financial resources to compete with them. In a purely football sense, they don't have that. So I think you're probably right. Like I said, the arguments to be made are for media markets and eyeballs and a little bit of history and tradition in football and winning and success. But
how many schools were in this phase for you?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I had 11 in this phase.
I believe you swayed me on Missouri. You could talk me into Missouri if they really wanted to.
So you're okay with Washington, Houston, UCLA?
I'm fine with
UCF,
Houston too.
Georgia Tech. Are you out on Georgia Tech?
I'm out on Georgia Tech.
You're out on Tech. Okay. Washington, Houston, UCLA, UCF.
Washington, Houston, UCLA. Well, I already had UCLA and Washington, so yes. Houston and UCF, you could talk me into.
Okay. Missouri, I can talk you into.
I think you could talk me into it.
Okay.
Now
So
I think we're going to be over 40, but we're already at 30. I think agreed between the two of us. So we're really just looking at which schools to lock in for the last 10 spots.
Okay, so we're striking Tech, Georgia Tech, Memphis, Illinois, Colorado, Stanford.
I would say so.
Okay.
All right. So
All
now,
right.
what was that?
Because you have Minnesota on your list.
Yes, I did. Yes. Big school, large market, just underrated, and you've seen them have success in football in recent years.
Yes.
So now we go to phase 4, and this is the last of the phases. I had 10 schools on my list.
I have 3.
Yeah, I don't remember all of yours. I know Utah was one.
Yeah.
But mine were 10. We just structured this differently. Mine included the likes of Arkansas and South Carolina.
Yes.
And there was, Ole Miss and Mississippi State. And then I did have West Virginia, Virginia Tech. I did have Oklahoma State. And then I don't think I had another Pac-12 school. I'm up to 7 here. Iowa was 1. So, again, some of these you already had.
You only have one that you haven't mentioned yet that we haven't talked about outside of Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, South Carolina.
I'm trying to think. I count 8 right now, but I don't remember. All right, so I know one, though, and I was trying to save it for last. What's up?
Baylor is your last.
That was what I was trying to say for last.
Okay.
Baylor is a private school. Having lived here in the state, though, there's quite a few Baylor fans in the Beaumont area. My therapist is a Baylor fan. People at my church are Baylor fans. So it is a private school. But I do think it has a lot of support. Like, I really think it would surprise people how much support Baylor has.
They're a Baptist school, right?
I believe so.
I think they are.
I know a girl around here who's a huge Baylor fan. So, again, I think they have more support than people think. You've also seen them have unprecedented success in some of these major sports.
Yeah.
They have been to, I think they've won 3 Big 12 championships in the last decade. They have been to 4 New Year's Six Bowls, and then they just won a national championship in basketball. So they, I think, are building resources, or already have resources, and have allocated them to be successful. So I feel like most schools on that list, people would wrap their arms around. Baylor is one. I think most people would be like, if not for recency bias or whatever, you probably wouldn't include them. And that's maybe true. Right. But I don't think people realize how far that school has come in the last 15 years.
I think your points, even outside of recent success, and even in the Big Two, if we're simply, like I said, simply football, recent success probably is enough to at least include them in the conversation. Then you look into it. They don't have a large enrollment, but they've got a huge alumni base and a very active alumni base. Like I said, we talked about this with some other schools. It's a school that people love to give money to. So I think you could convince me that Baylor. You could convince me of Baylor. Of the other 4 that you have that I don't think you convince me of any of them. But I'll let you try.
So you're out on Arkansas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State?
For now. Let's see if you can sway me, but Arkansas is the only one that I could, given the right arguments, be convinced of, and that's only because I live here right now.
Well,
we just moved. I live just outside of Fayetteville. the Hogs are the end-all be-all here. So I probably have a little bit of bias, but like, I don't know if they have the national reach.
You're right about national reach. What I will say about those schools, though, and it's the case with really every single SEC school, maybe except Missouri and Vanderbilt, I never question an SEC school's support.
Yeah,
Arkansas, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss have each had their struggles in the last 30 years, and the team still sells out.
Sells out is pushing it, especially at Arkansas. I mean, right.
Again, you know more than me.
Support's never a question.
Yeah.
Arkansas is a special case because outside of, Arkansas is a special case because there's so much money up here. The Waltons, Tyson, and J.B. Hunt are three of the largest corporations in the world. They're all headquartered within 30 miles of the campus of the University of Arkansas. And all three of those families and everybody that lives around here just pours money into the athletic department.
Oh, the 10th school I have was BYU. Okay, never mind. I knew I had 10 and I only counted 9.
Okay.
That
BYU.
was the other one. That was bugging me.
Oh, yeah, you're good. So, like I said, Arkansas, what you're not getting with Arkansas is a market worth a shit. Arkansas does not have any tentpole markets that you would want. Little Rock is tiny.
Yeah, but there's West Virginia.
I think you can argue that you get Pittsburgh's market with West Virginia.
No, that you're not far off.
I think you could argue better that you get Pittsburgh's market with West Virginia than say you could get Memphis's market with Arkansas or Kansas City.
You're not far off there. Pitt does not have a big following. I've lived in Western PA. It is a lot of West Virginia and Penn State, mostly Penn State, but it's a lot of West Virginia and Penn State. It's not really until you get within the city limits of Pittsburgh you might find a Pitt fan.
Right. So that's kind of my, like I said, support and following notwithstanding, I just don't think Arkansas has the desirables for a league like this where you're going to want as many eyeballs as possible. I just don't think they have it. You could convince me that support is enough. That tradition, they've got some. They're not the best tradition schools.
All those SEC schools I mentioned have kind of been up and down.
Yeah. So Arkansas, I'm iffy on. I could be convinced that they belong because of the support and the resources that they have. So
I will say this. Of those four.
And the same could be said for me for Ole Miss.
I was just about to say, if you want to eliminate two, I'm willing to concede Mississippi State and South Carolina.
Yes, because they're the thing that you get, and the last thing you get with Arkansas is you get a school that owns a state.
Yeah.
You get a school that owns a state. I think you don't get a school that owns a state with Ole Miss, but you get a school that is the flagship school in that state. Mississippi State is a very clear number 2. Ole Miss is a very clear number 1 in Mississippi, I would say.
Okay. I don't spend a lot of time, or haven't spent a lot of time in Mississippi, but I will say this. I've not the destination is a big part of this. Like, who gives a shit where you're going? Like, but I've heard, I've not been there, but Oxford is much nicer than Starkville. I've been to Starkville. I'm not impressed.
Starkville is a dump.
It's about, and I don't think Morgantown's a dump, but I've been to both. I think Morgantown's better.
Right. I've had fun in Starkville. We went Starkville. We grew up 2 hours from Starkville. I dated a girl that went to Mississippi State in high school.
I don't get why girls love Mississippi State.
Who knows?
I don't know. I don't get it. It's a dump.
But I've also gone to Oxford, and Oxford's just better. It's a cooler town. It's a bigger school. Girls are hotter. Let my wife hear that.
I have heard that the female to guy ratio at Ole Miss is something like 4-1.
Yeah, it's like 3-1. It's nuts. Yeah. That means nothing. But like, in terms of our.
Oh, I know. I just wanted to throw that in there.
But I mean, and then I think you get with Mississippi State, you get the history with like the Mannings and even like recently with Hugh Freeze and now Lane Kiffin. You get enough eyes on Ole Miss that I think you can warrant, like you said, you probably get the Memphis market with Ole Miss. I think I would be okay with if you're conceding Mississippi State and South Carolina because you're not getting a state with South Carolina because you're getting that with Clemson. You don't really need South Carolina.
No, and I will say this. It's clear that you're right. I mean, Mississippi, I think Ole Miss is the number one. And I do believe South Carolina is probably number two. Even at the height of the Spurrier years at South Carolina, Clemson was still kind of there with them in terms of support.
Yeah. Yeah,
and South Carolina was a hell of a lot better than Clemson was at that time.
That has kind of shifted a little bit because I would say 20, 25 years ago it was probably what it is now. Opposite. South Carolina was probably up here because Clemson was people don't really understand how low Clemson was for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And then they decided they want to start caring about athletics, and things shifted quickly. So, like I said, yeah, I think Mississippi State and South Carolina are in need of shaping. I don't think we need Mississippi State and South Carolina.
Okay. I want to point this out. I don't know why it is. Auburn and Clemson feel like schools to me that should be private schools, but they're actually public schools. I don't know if it's just the name, because I feel like most private schools aren't South Carolina State, obviously, or, right. Alabama State. So you think Auburn and Clemson, you're like, is that a private school?
Yeah, well, they were for a long time. I mean,
okay, I didn't know that.
Auburn was a private school until like the probably like a little before World War II.
Okay.
They were called Alabama Polytechnic Institute until the 1957 national championship at Auburn was not won by Auburn University, won by Alabama Polytechnic Institute. Changed the name in 1958.
I did not know that.
But that's a fun fact because I know everything there is to know about Auburn. But Auburn and Clemson are also like the exact same school. The people that started Clemson came from Auburn. So it's set up exactly like Auburn. The buildings look exactly the same. The curriculum is exactly the same. So they are very, very similar. Clemson is, if you're not a Clemson person, a lot of people will call it like Auburn with a lake because it's right there on a lake, and it's like I said, basically the same thing. I went there my freshman year. We played them the year after the national championship. Was our first loss since 2009, and like I said, it was like being in Auburn, just 6 hours away.
All right, so we agree on 30 out of the 40, and I believe we have collected a list of maybe 10 to 15 schools that can fight for those last 10 spots. So let's go ahead and...
Wait, I've got two more.
Oh, I'm sorry, you do. I forgot about this.
I have two more schools in here because we've already talked about Utah. I've got three schools in my fourth phase.
I'm particularly proud of you for this one.
I have included, and I'm going to do this the correct way because there is a correct way to list these schools. I'm going Naval Academy, the United States Naval Academy, and them bitches up in West Point, the United States Military Academy and Army. My thoughts with these two are they are probably the most tradition, history, pageantry, like the essence of what college football is. History, tradition, pageantry, like these things matter in college football. These two schools are the most steeped in those things outside of probably some of our no-brainer schools, Alabama, Notre Dame, Michigan, USC, like those type of schools. Army and Navy have what you want there. What they also have is a national following. You get, service members, veterans, family members of service members that will watch specifically like the Army-Navy game. Like the Army-Navy game is one of the most watched games every year, not just because it's a standalone game, but because of what that means to the American, not even just like the sports American culture, but like the American culture in general. Another thing you also get, not for nothing, you get into the DMV market with Navy, you get into the New York City market with Army. So that's nothing to sneeze at. Either of those two, certainly New York City, because we're not. Neither of us are in New York City, really in the Northeast at all, right now, and wouldn't be there if we don't have Army.
Yeah, there's not a school up there.
There's really not. You're to get in that market.
I will say this: Rutgers is a much bigger school than what I thought it was. I think it has an enrollment close to 50,000.
Yeah,
but again, there's zero support for Rutgers.
None whatsoever. And that's your problem when you get to schools up there, Syracuse, Boston College, UConn, Rutgers. There's not enough there to include for those schools like that to be included in this. So, if you want a foothold there, I think Army is your best bet. And like I said, you get all the history, you get all the tradition, and you get this national following. I think that Army and Navy deserve to be included.
I'll tell you what, my friend. This is bold, but it's not stupid.
No, and the biggest detriment for them is going to be the ability to recruit the talent necessary to compete with these types of these brands.
Yeah.
That I understand. They more than any school that we've talked about in like the private schools have a disadvantage.
I was going to ask, are these schools private? I guess they are.
I think actually they're technically public.
I guess so, yeah. Well, they're government funded, so yeah. That would make sense.
Yeah, they have. Who knows? But they, more than any school we've talked about, maybe outside of Stanford, but even then, like, these are schools that are damn near impossible to get into. You have to be an incredible student. You have to be an incredible person. You have to get a congressional, recommendation to apply to these schools. But like I said, it's given all of the things that I've talked about. I think that Army and Navy deserve to be included, even with the recruiting challenges that they would have.
Man, it's hard to say no to the service academies. But I feel like if you're going to have Army and Navy, you got to also have Air Force.
I'd say, that's the thing. I don't think you need to have Air Force because they're the newer.
You're right, though. You're right about that.
They don't have, because like I said, I based a lot of their inclusion on the history and the pageantry and the tradition, and kind of like I said, what Army Navy means to the American culture outside of sports, outside of whatever. I think that they deserve inclusion.
If Army was as bad as it was like a decade ago, I would be totally against this. But now that they're somewhat good,
they are both, even now. And of course, Army is independent and Navy is in the American. They are both. Navy has dropped a little bit, but they are both successful enough.
Yeah.
I think for that to not be a detriment to them. And then everything else that you get, like I said, I think it outweighs the negatives in the talent gap that they may have. And you got to think, not for nothing, I want the triple option in my league. These two teams are going to run the triple option, and I want it. So,
man, this is a fascinating argument. It really is. because I think these schools are tricky, obviously, tricky opponents. And I think that having the game between Army and Navy under your banner would be huge. I mean, that game gets its own week, it gets its own major broadcast where just about everybody is tuned in and everybody has chosen a side.
I have no connection whatsoever. Everybody in my family served in the Army, but this is a Navy household because I chose Navy,
See,
and I chose a side in that rivalry. And
I was
went
the
for Navy.
same until, for whatever, it dawned on me one time, later than it should have. I'm like, my grandfather served in the Army. I really ought to cheer for Army.
Yeah.
And I am cheering for Navy. He didn't give a shit, but
Yeah, I didn't care.
but it's a really fascinating argument because I think that is something interesting and would bring a lot of viewership and really could lead to a lucrative contract with TV networks. I think you know where I'm going with this, though. I'm going to say no, and it's unfortunate, but do people really give a shit about Alabama playing Army? Or Ohio State playing Navy?
Probably not, Shane.
I hate to do it, man. And believe me, I think you love our service members more than I do, and I have a lot of respect for them. But they don't care. We only care about Army Navy. It's that one game.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm gonna have to say no.
Okay.
I know you understand. You're heartbroken, but I know you understand.
I do. Like, I get it, but I wanted them in so bad.
I know, but we can't just.
I don't even care. You know what? Let's compromise. Let's just take Navy.
No, my compromise. We'll get to it here in a bit, but my compromise is something else.
Okay. And the third team I have is Utah.
Yeah.
And we've talked about them already.
So I believe our number is at 30 of the schools we agree on. It could be more than that, though. Let's go through your list again.
We're at 30 to begin our list, and I think you convinced me of, Michigan State, North Carolina.
Well, you already had North Carolina.
Or you convinced me of Michigan State.
Yeah.
To add to my list. You convinced me of TCU.
Okay.
To add to my list.
I didn't think I had that one, but all right. I'll take it.
Yeah, you had TCU. I didn't let you convince me of Arizona State.
Okay.
You convinced me of Arkansas.
Okay.
And you convinced me of Ole Miss.
Okay.
So
we got 6 spots left.
6 spots left for me. Because.
Well, I'll go ahead and say I believe Missouri. I'll give you Missouri.
Okay.
And did you not give me Ole Miss?
I did. Yeah, I gave you Ole Miss.
Okay.
Because I gave you what? Because I gave you Michigan State, TCU.
What were the other two? Arkansas and Ole Miss.
Arkansas, Ole Miss.
Okay.
Now, so we're putting Mizzou back in.
Yeah, I'll go. I'll extend Olive Branch and go with Missouri.
What did we have? We had a different one.
I thought you convinced me of more.
Did I convince you of UCF?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm fine with those two, yeah.
UCF and Houston.
Yeah. So now we got...
A few of those.
No, we have 3 spots left. Okay.
3 spots. What did you convince me of? Oh, we already talked about that.
Yeah. So now we just have an open dialogue for the last 3.
Now we just have 3. I would allow you to convince me of...
Because that gives us 4 teams in Texas and Florida, correct?
Did I let you convince me of Baylor?
I don't remember you saying that, but...
We have 4 teams in Texas. We got Texas A&M,
TCU, and Houston.
And Houston, yeah.
I honestly think you're getting about the same thing for Baylor or Houston at this point.
Yeah, I think you are too. So I don't know if I would let you convince me of Baylor. So I think we're at 3.
Okay. Hmm. All right, so I would say Baylor's probably out. Are we really sure about Colorado? I'm not.
No, I'm not as sure about Colorado as I should be. Stanford's definitely no.
One that neither of us talked about, but I considered, was the University of Virginia.
Yeah, Virginia, but I think you're getting the same thing in Virginia that you're getting in North Carolina.
Roughly, yeah, and I agree there. They're like North Carolina light.
The state of Virginia and Virginia Tech. I think you're even getting that region with West Virginia. I don't think you need Virginia. They're another academic first school too. I don't think you need Virginia.
Okay. That gives me great pleasure. I hate East Virginia.
Yeah, I know you do. I'm trying to think of other teams that we could like. Is like a Kansas State worth bandying about?
I don't. I mean, before Bill Snyder got there, they were going to drop the program.
Yeah.
Granted, that was 100 years ago.
See more than anything, and there you're not getting anything with Kansas, even
No.
really like the state of Kansas.
That would only be for basketball.
Yeah.
I think Texas Tech is intriguing, but I'd rather have Baylor than Texas Tech.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at Texas, other teams in Texas, Baylor's your surefire number one, and I'm not even sure that I would go Texas Tech over a school like SMU, just because of what you get. I know we already have what we need in TCU.
SMU is interesting. They're kind of like TCU. I'm not sure if they're private or not. I would imagine they are, being a Christian school. One school, I mean, if you want them in, I would be fine with Stanford. I don't agree with it, but
yeah, I think Stanford may have the best argument just for market's sake, because I think you need to get into that market. You don't need.
Yeah, because I agree. It might be the same state. It's kind of like Texas. California is all one state, but there's a huge difference between Southern California and Northern California.
Right.
And you could convince me that UCLA and USC have strong footholds in San Francisco, but I'm not sure it's that much.
Yeah, so I think with Stanford you get that foothold, and you get the resources and the alumni support that could, and recent success and decent history that could allow them to be in. So is that one?
I'll give you that one. So we got two more.
Here's one that we haven't talked about yet either. What about Boise State? What do you do with Boise State?
I revert you to my answer with Memphis.
Yeah, you don't get much, and it's pretty regional.
Boise State's been passed over quite a few times at this point.
That was what I was thinking. Like I said, I wanted to bring them up at least because it seems like they're kind of always talked about in realignment time, and like you said, they've been passed over 2 or 3 times now. So I think there's a couple other schools that you could talk about in the vein of a Georgia Tech. Like you could talk about Cincinnati. Whereas,
I'll tell you what, we're trying to find two. I'd be fine with Georgia Tech, although I'm not sure they're much better or worse than, or really all that much better in general than a South Carolina or a Mississippi State.
Yeah.
At this point, I didn't write it in my blog, but you could argue at this point it's going to be like, who do you know? Kind of like a country club.
Yeah.
For these last couple spots. Are you good friends with this school? Or rivals, good friends with this school?
Yeah. If you don't want to lose like a Georgia Tech, I guess you can make the same argument if you don't want to lose a South Carolina Clemson.
Although honestly, those aren't really huge rivalries to me. They probably matter to the fan bases, but the general country does not care.
No, yeah. I mean, if we've got 2 spots left, man, I'm just gonna keep stumping for the service academies. I'm gonna keep stumping for Army and Navy.
Oddly enough, I was thinking the same thing.
I just, like I said, I think that they have too much to give. That their detriments are not enough to keep them out.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. For shits and giggles, we can't be here all night. Let's go with it.
Army and Navy.
Army and Navy. We have our Premier League.
Hell yeah.
Army and Navy are going to be near the bottom.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
So, in what I referenced it a couple times. My compromise with those schools was the concept of relegation.
Yes. So
I think this is something we should. I don't think we're ever going to see it in America for our professional sports leagues, but for college football, there are so many different levels where between like the haves and the have-nots. There's a huge difference between even at the Power 5 level of Ohio State and a school like West Virginia and a school like Wake Forest. No offense to Wake Forest, but of the Premier League, we're taking basically the Ohio State and West Virginia level schools and putting them there. Then you get like the Wake Forest and maybe the top tier group of 5 schools, and that's a level, or maybe they separate. I don't know, but that's kind of a level. Then you have the FCS and Division 2, 3, etc. So there's so many levels, kind of like what you see in like the English Premier League. There are 2 or 3 or 4 levels of that. And then, every year the bottom 3 go down, the top 3 go up. I would be fine with that, honestly. I would love to see that.
I think that gives your schools like Cincinnati, maybe a Boise State, maybe a whoever. Those types.
Cincinnati's another school I considered. Obviously, big market, big school.
Yeah.
Not very many resources though.
No. Yeah. Because you certainly know more about them than I would. Given the old Big East thing,
I've been to that stadium. It's a dump. Their facilities are trash. No offense, Cincinnati, and moving to the Big 12 can fix that. But I think they have a long way to go.
They got a ways to go. I think relegation is something that, given a longer period of time to discuss something like that would kind of fix the bottom of this of our list here, and say, okay, we'll give. To start off, we'll give it to Georgia Tech, Army, and Navy, knowing that Georgia Tech, Army, and Navy are probably going to be the first 3 that are relegated, and Cincinnati,
Baylor,
and Kentucky, are going to be are going to be the first 3 that are moved back up. So.
I mean, this is really fascinating, and we're pretty much done at this point. If y'all want to stop listening, I guess. But I mean, I went really in depth, and you're going to read it. I'm assuming you're going to read it tomorrow. You don't have to.
I know. I'm looking forward to your blog post. I'm really interested to see kind of, like I said, we talked it out a lot, but I'm really interested to see your. Like I said to you earlier, I feel like this is your magnum opus. Like this is going to be your Sistine Chapel.
I had a post after grad school where it was more for me and West Virginia fans because, I was the only kid in our high school that cheered for West Virginia. I was made fun of all the time. And then I went to the school and, just loved my time there. But while I was there, we stunk at almost everything.
Yeah.
And it was just very unfortunate because I grew up, mainly with the Pat White, Steve Slayton era. Then we kind of went to the Geno Smith and Tavon Austin era, which were fun. And then when I got there, it was our first year in the Big 12, so we were like blindsided by the level of competition. Yeah. And then it was a tough start, and then we kind of got better as I left. And then like the year I left, we were 8-5 in football. Then the next year, I think we were 10-2, and then that entered the Will Greer era, that was my first year at grad school. So that was fun. But then my last year at grad school, we stunk, and Neil Brown's first year. And then it was the same in basketball. We struggled in basketball. Except it was similar. We had a losing record my first year at WVU in basketball. And then year 2 was a little bit better. I think we went to NIT. And then on my way out in undergrad, they made the tournament and went to the Sweet 16. And then that gave us 4 really good years of the Javon Carter era. Then when I got back for grad school, Javon Carter left. And right away, we stunk in grad school. Then we were a little bit better my senior year, my second year of grad school, but that was the COVID year, so the tournament was canceled. And then we've kind of struggled since. So
that sucks.
That was basically what my post was about. And after I graduated, the post was, basically an apology. I'm done with school. I don't intend on going back to WVU. And then I showed, what the records were the years I wasn't enrolled at West Virginia compared to the years I was, and all these sports. And I considered that my magnum opus.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, but for the outsiders,
right?
The non ears.
No, and that's a fair point. I mean, this is probably I haven't really done anything this in depth probably ever since. Maybe the conference realignment one last year, after the Texas and Oklahoma news. But yeah, I really went into it. I said, what is this version of realignment targeting? So if this Premier League happened, what schools would be targeted? Who's at an advantage? Who's at a disadvantage? Then it was, what schools would be, how many schools would be invited? And I said, I'm going to go with 40, but it's probably not going to be 40.
No.
I think I got rid of it in the post, but I originally wrote, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel at that point. So then it went to, which schools?
And that for sure showed toward the end of our
yes.
Our too. Like that was, yeah.
And I that's why I did that, to show. Everyone thinks, just invite all the Power 5 schools. And I'm like, if you think all Power 5 schools are going to get this invite, you're highly mistaken.
Yeah. Big wrong.
So then it shifted to which schools will be invited, and then that's when I broke it down to these different phases. And then after that, I had my 40 teams. I structured it the way I wanted to. I showed the division alignment, which wasn't great, but it was fine. Then it went to protected rivalries. Then it went to schedule uniformity, which I think is a big problem in college football right now.
Yep.
I don't like that the ACC and the SEC, not to pick on those schools, but are playing 8 conference games where the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the Big 10 are playing 9. Just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, probably not. But
how is the committee supposed to judge a team when we're playing different number of games, or non-conference and conference games?
Well, I think.
And for the most part, I think the committee gets it right.
But it gets it usually. Yeah, I would agree. I think what you've seen, especially in the playoff era, is scheduling has really taken a tick up. There are a lot of schools that in the BCS era, especially in the ACC and the SEC, they played their 8 conference games, and then they would play 4 nobodies. You're seeing a lot more schools, Auburn's certainly one of them, that are.
Another big complaint. I didn't write this. I probably should write this, but I do not like the SEC playing a cupcake the week before rivalry week. Every other conference is in the heat of conference slates. The SEC is playing a nobody. We are at the finish line here, Steven. It's not, you can keep saying I'm crying. It doesn't make sense.
I'm biased here because our rivalry week means that we have to play the best program in college football history. And so you could say that about Kentucky and Tennessee and Arkansas and the Mississippi schools, but you can't say that to me because that means we have to play Alabama. And I'm okay with playing with you know what? And what we've started to do, you turd, and something a lot of schools don't do, is we'll get one of the FCS schools from in-state and pay them to keep it in-state. So you go down to Samford.
Who gives a fuck?
Or Alabama State, and you tell them that they don't deserve our money.
That's where we're headed. These schools aren't going to survive without being paid.
Well, you're right, but right now they need it, okay?
Oh my God.
And don't look at the schedule for this year because we're not playing any of them this year, but we're playing 2 Georgia schools this year. We're playing Mercer, and I don't think we're playing Southern this year, but yeah, we've made it. Look, we're playing school. We're keeping our money in state, except for South San Jose and Western Kentucky.
Anyway,
so you hush.
So I got some beef with schedule uniformity.
Third weekend in November, you're playing Oklahoma or you're playing Iowa State or But you know what? Fourth week of the year when you're playing Marshall.
We don't play Marshall anymore.
Or you're playing friggin' Ball State.
It's Virginia Tech this year.
Shut up. We need to play LSU. So tough one.
It's you missed it by a week. Our week 2 and 3 games are Towson and Kansas.
Because West Virginia has been one of those schools that has been very diligent in like scheduling Power 5 or like top tier Group of 5 opponents, which is good. Like you said, they finally got back to scheduling Pitt, which I think is a necessity. They've got this thing with Virginia Tech. I think that's awesome. They've scheduled Tennessee a couple of times. I think that's good. I think that's what you'll start to see more of.
They're going to dial it back. They're going to dial it back, and they should. I mean, I made the argument a while back, but you really should have one Power 5 school. Now, I will say this: if you're like in Alabama from like 2018, and your one Power 5 opponent is Duke, no, I'm sorry, no. That's a soft schedule, in my opinion.
I agree.
So anyway, we got off topic there, but then I got into schedule uniformity, and that took me down to I forget.
In the concept of what we're talking about, scheduling does matter, and I think that if it's divisional and kind of how you break it down in your blog,
I made it as regionalized as possible.
Yeah. I think scheduling is going to matter because you're not going to be able to. I mean, you could play down 1 or 2 games a year, but you're going to have to play, depending on how you got playoffs set up, you're going to be playing the best of the best and competing with the best of the best to win the championships. So you're going to have to schedule well.
Yeah, so basically what I came up with was 5 divisions of 8 schools, because that kept like 90%, I feel like, of the rivalries and the good matchups. There were some that get left out, but that's why you have protected rivalries. And not every team, though, has meaningful protected rivalries.
Yeah.
The bulk of them were games that or teams that have no history at all. Some weren't. Like one was LSU Bama. They're in different divisions. Spoiler alert. And I was like, well, they have to match up in a cross-divisional matchup. Same with Auburn and LSU. But like. And then I did have one, like West Virginia's was Penn State. I didn't have Penn State and West Virginia in the same division, but that's an old school rivalry. They haven't played in a while. We play them next year, I think.
Regional, yeah.
And then I do have them, but then the other one I think for West Virginia was Michigan State, a school we don't have any affiliation with. So, and that's the case with a lot of these programs. And I thought, why am I doing this? Well, because of schedule uniformity. If one school has to play 2 teams in another division, everybody should have to play 2 teams in a different division. Maybe not every year, but a committee is like, no. You don't get to play 3 schools from the lower level. You have to play Ohio State. You have to play Michigan. You have to play Bama. You have to whatever.
Right. Yeah. I like that.
So that's my point with schedule uniformity, and that brought me to the playoff. How does it affect the playoff? I say expand the playoff. Again, I'll get into it more.
16.
But if we're going to have 40, you can't have the top 4. It's got to be 12 or 16. I think I've made the argument for 16. And then I wrapped up, I believe, I created a section for NIL, which wasn't my initial plan. But I was like, you know what? Screw it.
It's as important as anything right now in college football.
Yeah, and I don't know really what you do. I think it's a big problem.
It's got to be fixed.
I shouldn't say it's a big problem, and I make a point to say this. I firmly believe NIL and the transfer portal have done more good than harm.
Yes, but
however, there is a huge problem.
How they're being used,
yes,
is problematic.
So, yeah, I agree.
The system in place is a good one and has done more good than harm, but the way the system is being used and abused is a problem.
And there are some things they got to crack down on.
Yes.
And again, I've said this before. I don't really blame them. We can blame the NCAA all we want. I don't really blame them, and that's kind of I'm in the minority there.
Yeah.
But this
Don't
this
disagree
is
with you, but-
unprecedented. I'm not sure they really knew what to expect, so they were like, okay, well, let's just kind of see what happens. But now they're in a tough spot because if they dial back or restrict some of these schools or athletes in their compensation, as Andrew Brandt says on Twitter, there will be lawyers.
Oh, plenty of lawyers. There's gonna be a whole lot of
It's
bills.
going to be tough, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Well,
I like that. Fun.
This has been fun. I enjoyed this.
This has been one of our more enjoyable ones.
And I don't even think this is. We're pushing our longest here, but
I really liked this. I was really looking forward to this, and this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, because I've had this lined up for probably 2 weeks, and I keep pushing it off. I kept pushing it off.
Yeah.
And because I was writing, and I had writer's block for the longest time, and I debated just not doing it at all. But I finally buckled down and did it this past weekend, and the days leading up to tonight. We're recording this on Thursday evening.
Kind of sad I didn't get to yell at you, but I guess we'll.
I did say, yeah, if I don't have this done by Wednesday night, I was like, you can yell at me. And I meant to text you during the day. I was like, because I didn't get the chance to work on it at work.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is going to be tighter than I thought it would be. And then I got home, and I actually finished quicker than I thought I would. And then I texted you. I said, I think I got this done. And you were like, I was just about to ask how it was going. And I was like, well, I meant to ask you for a deadline, and I didn't.
I'm sure I'll find something else to yell at you about. It's okay.
I thought we were going to get it heated tonight, and we really didn't.
Yeah, I think we were both in the same mindset. We just kind of looked at it differently.
Yeah. And I'm glad we did. I mean, that was two sides of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and I think that probably, comes from. That probably comes from me being from a no-brainer type school. You being from a school that deserves to be included, but is not a no-brainer. You have to make the arguments.
I didn't choose this life. This life chose me.
Yeah. So
I say that all the time. I mean, I had no choice. When I was born, my grandfather put a West Virginia onesie on me.
Yeah.
And believe me, I hate it. It has had its moments where I have enjoyed it, but my God, it has done me more harm than good.
Auburn and West Virginia aren't too dissimilar, and we've talked about that.
Oh, shut up! Don't give me that shit.
Oh, come on.
That's like William saying the other day on Facebook. I shared a meme or something that was like, men choose their sports teams at the age of 11, and then let it ruin the rest of their lives. And I agreed with it. And he commented and said, yes, because cheering for Green Bay has been so hard. I was like, you have had a Stanley Cup, you have witnessed multiple Super Bowls with your Giants, and Auburn has competed and won a national championship. I really don't want to hear it from you.
Yeah, I guess if you would expand it, for me...
It's not the NFL. It was just sports teams.
Stanley Cup, couple of World Series.
And I had a Stanley Cup, but I really wasn't a full-fledged Boston fan at that time. I did watch the team, and I was cheering for them, but I wasn't what I am now in terms of being a Boston fan.
Right. So, yeah, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. I'll shut up now.
With that said, I have witnessed a Super Bowl. No World Series, though. Hopefully that changes this year with the Mets. Or the Reds. There's still time for the Reds to get hot. I had the... what's it called? What game was it tonight? Field of Dreams game.
Field of Dreams game, yeah.
It threw me off. There were two wishbone C's in the scoreboard because they were doing throwbacks, and it threw me off. But thankfully, the Reds had Reds next to it, so that helped because I wouldn't have been able to guess. Well, all right. Is there anything else we need to discuss?
I don't think so. I
think we covered all of our bases.
Yeah, we did, for sure.
All right. Hopefully, this has been recording.
Oh, God, I hope so.
Yes, it has. It has. It has. Right. I'm scared. I was scared. I was thinking during...
We've had that problem before.
We have had that problem. Well, all right. It is 10:30. You have children and a family. I will let you go. I might stick around a little bit late and read my book. I don't know. Maybe text some females. I don't know, but
we'll see. Who knows?
We'll see.
Have a blast.
I will. Thank you for coming on, my man. College football just right around the corner.
Right around the corner. This is the best time of the year.
It feels good. I don't really. I'm not that excited for the season in terms for West Virginia, but it's just always fun. I just can't believe it's already here. It feels like it snuck up on me.
As it always does.
Well, just we bitch about how the offseason is so long, but I feel like the older I get, the quicker the offseason goes by.
Yeah, it's because we just don't have breaks anymore. We just live our lives. We don't have summer, Christmas, spring.
The next time you come on this podcast, I might be 30 years old, and I'm still wrapping my brain around that.
Hell, I might be 32.
When is your birthday again?
November.
No, you'll be on for the baseball playoffs.
Playoffs, yeah. Okay. Well, I'll be close.
It'll be close. It will be close.
Yes.
All right, man. I will let you go.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yep, absolutely.
Take it easy.
Later.